Have you ever had a financial emergency? Like strapped for cash with a deadline? Not just I'm broke, but like this is coming due and there are repercussions if I don't. Like they're going to take my car or I don't get to live there anymore. Most of us have probably been in some version of that at some point, hopefully not right now, but of course, the way the world is right now, in America anyway, we've got credit cards and payday loans and a number of other helps to avoid those problems, but we know they really just kind of delay those problems, often magnify those problems. I will tell you, I knew a girl, she was in her early 20s, her car broke down, and she needed to fix it. She got a payday loan for about $230, was all they would give her. And then she didn't get her car fixed in time to not lose her job. And so then that payday loan, she didn't have any way to pay it. And she didn't tell anyone for months, not a year, but months, a long time. She finally told her parents about the problem, and her parents paid it off for $960. That's just how those things multiply with late fees and interest and all that stuff. So again, so I'm just, to prove my point, they don't really help. They just delay and magnify. Anyway, for most of us in those situations, our first thought, our first hope is family, just like for her. Like she didn't talk to him for a while, but eventually we would turn to family if we had those problems. But there are a lot of folks, here included, with really no family to turn to, no first call. And then others of us have family, but they're broke too. Like that doesn't, they know about it now. They're worried also, but they can't really help. Today's passage of Scripture is about a woman absolutely in a financial emergency, absolutely with a deadline, and with, as we'll read, no family on the screen here to turn to. It's in 2 Kings chapter 4. I'll put it up on the screen here and read along if you'd like. 2 Kings chapter 4. There we go. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves." So Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons, and then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the full ones." So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There's not another vessel." So the oil ceased. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest." That's awesome. It's really understated. They don't really explain all the details of that. He doesn't say how much oil, but a jar of oil, and then she said, "Go get everything you can that'll hold stuff, and we're going to pour this much oil into all of them. We're going to fill them up." So that's amazing. That's a miracle. It's really, they could have, if they had written it today, and there would have been exclamation points and emojis and just a ton. There's a lot in there. There's like excitement and emotion. And there it is. The very first thing that I think that says to us, this passage, is miracle. It tells us is that God can and will use what you have. I love that. It's kind of impressive, really, that she even mentioned the oil. Oil was a thing of value. It was used sort of, not as currency, but it was close. It was close enough that she would mention, this is an asset that we have, this oil. But we, in her situation, probably would have said, "I don't have anything." That's probably what we would have, our natural, I've got this much oil, but that's not going to get anything done. So in reality, I'm just going to say I don't have anything. But she spoke up and said, "I do have this." And it is that thing that Elisha, which she volunteered? Would she declare, this, I have this? That's the thing that Elisha said, God's going to use that thing and take care of all of it. So that means as you sit there saying, well, maybe you say, I don't have anything, but this story says, find the thing, the small thing that you do have, because God has put it there with a purpose. And God's ability is so great that he can use that thing to do great things. Another message that I hear in this passage is that as God does this, as God fulfills your needs, the process may very well require you to knock on your neighbor's door. Oh, now this is tough. One, we don't even want to bother them. Some of us don't even want to know them. Some of us don't talk to them because we're upset about how the trash situation is going. We don't want to, our neighbors, they're over there for a reason. I wish I had a taller fence. But this says, no, you're going to go talk to your neighbors. And then not only are you going to talk to them, you're not going to ask them for money, but you are going to ask them for a favor. Man, I don't want to be indebted to that guy or her. But God says, the plan that I've got is going to require you to reach out. Now, this woman, we don't get her name. She goes to Elisha because she was about to lose her son. That's strapped for cash with a deadline. That's a big deal. He says, what should I do? What do you have? Which is really interesting, just the process. But she came asking to save my sons. That was her whole request. It was, I've got these debts, and this is the cost of what's going to happen if I don't pay them. But the way this whole story ends is Elisha was done. He said, pay your debts and live on the rest. It wasn't just, you brought me your problem, I fixed your problem. It was, you brought me your problem, and I set you up for life. That's how God moves. We kind of undersell it sometimes, but God is looking to take care of you for always. Now, he doesn't necessarily take care of you for always right now. If God does a miracle in your bank account, it's not necessarily to retire on, okay? But if God does a miracle in your bank account, it's an indication that God is planning to take care of you through retirement. Do you understand that? God's not going to save you today from your problem and then let you die tomorrow from a new problem. That's not what he's doing. And so here it is. She says, I need this help. And he says, I've got you covered. I love it when the mom says, bring me the next one. My mom, you're right, they're filling up the vessels. All right, bring me the next one. First of all, I know my mom probably would have passed out. Just from shock and excitement, not from the work. She can work. But she just, I can't believe this is amazing. It's still pouring. What is going on? And eventually, But this mom, she just says, bring me the next one. She doesn't say, is there any oil left? She doesn't quite, she's sold out. She's been convinced of the miracle while it's happening. Do you understand that? She's absolutely convinced of God's power. This is what's happening. Elisha said, do this. I'm doing it, and what is impossible is happening, and now I believe it. And so just bring me another one. There's more oil, is what she's saying. And being convinced is changing how she behaves. That's a great thing. And it's not hard to say that it's made her a different person. Because before she came to Elisha, who was a man of God, and she knew it. But she went to a guy. Okay? People come to the pastor. I can't make miracles happen. Okay? But people come to the pastor not because I'm connected to God necessarily. Some of them come because they know that, well, I'm committed to be a helper. I'm committed to be a nice guy. I know about some resources. Okay? She went to Elisha. She was absolutely willing to let God do something amazing, but she figured Elisha has available to handle it, resources. Elisha can fix this. She went to a guy. But Elisha said, let's have God handle it. And then as she's going through the process, she recognized that this is exactly what's happening. Now, my needs are being met by the Lord. Bring me another one. There's more oil. Now, I want to show you a movie clip. I really like this movie. I've talked about movies from time to time, and I'll tell you, don't see this movie. I just happen to know about it. This one, it's up in the air. I'm pretty sure. I didn't even check. I think the movie's rated R. This clip is not. Don't be afraid. It's totally fine. But here's the thing. This movie has, It's got a lot of violence in it, so maybe it's not for you. But it's got a lot of good ideas and themes in it. So I'm not quite endorsing this movie to all of you, but here comes this movie clip. It's from The Road to Perdition. Tom Hanks, how bad can it be, right? Good old Tom Hanks. Here we go. Wait a second. Let me tell you what's going on here. So here's Tom Hanks. It's Prohibition. I've got it. Prohibition era, like America. Tom Hanks works basically for the mafia. So yeah, it's not for everybody. So here's the thing. Bad things happen to his family, and he realizes that he and his son are under threat. Like bad things are coming for them unless they stop them. Okay? So that's what Al Capone. His decision is that if Al Capone, right, we know this, real guy, Al Capone, if I go talk to Al Capone, he will give me permission to either stop that guy or he'll stop that guy, and it will be good. But I'm a little person. Al Capone doesn't care what I think. So his decision is, I'm going to start robbing banks just of Al Capone's money, and then I'll go take it to him and say, listen, I can take your money, or I can return your money. I need a favor. Your choice. So this is his plan. And now he's got his son who's in middle school, and he's taught him how to drive their, Model A, whatever old-time car they're driving. He's taught him how to drive it to be the getaway driver while they're robbing banks, okay? Now, so they've had a busy day of robbing banks now, and Grace, you stop it. Okay. I will never do that to any of your kids, I promise. So they've had a busy day of robbing banks, and now they're at this diner having dinner, okay?
Coffee?
Thank you.
So what brings you guys to the middle of nowhere?
We're bank robbers.
We're just passing through.
So when do I get my share of the money?
Well, how much do you want?
$200.
Okay, deal.
Could I have had more?
You'll never know.
All right. Did you catch that? So son says, well, when can I get my cut? Dad says, well, how much do you want? He thinks about it. He says, $200. And then Dad says, all right. He says, could I have more? We'll never know. We'll never know. I think that speaks to an aspect of this widow's oil story as well. It's something that I always see. I'm always struck by it. The passage goes straight from Elisha giving instructions, right? He says, go do this. And then the very next thing is the woman is closing the door with her sons inside and the vessels. It doesn't say how many vessels they collected. It doesn't say how hard they tried to get as many vessels as they could. But what it does say is that as soon as all the vessels they had were full, the oil stopped flowing. So the question is, if there had been one more vessel, would the oil have continued? Just what he's asking. If I'd asked for more, could I have had more? And the truth is, we'll never know. But my gut tells me yes. I don't think it just so worked out that God's oil amount and their vessel amount were lined up perfectly accidentally or whatever. And so what that should say to you, to me, how it should inform our belief is that we actually have the power, hear this, we have the power to limit God. Not like we can stop him from doing something he wants to do, but we have the ability to limit what he does because he's given us that. He gives it to us. God's miraculous oil flowed for exactly as long as the faith and preparation of that widow and her sons would allow. Do you understand that? They were given a direction, go get these things, with the implied promise that God's going to fill them up, and then everyone they got, God filled up. So the promise says that had they gotten 3 more vessels, they would have had 3 more vessels full of oil. Do you get that? So their ability, their participation, their obedience created the limit. And we have that same ability. It's heavy to think about, I know that. In our reading plan, we just read Matthew chapter 21, which said if you have faith and do not doubt, you can say to this mountain, move, and it will do so. That's heavy. That's a lot, because none of us have ever moved a physical mountain, but Jesus said we could. And so we wrestle with that. What limits are we putting on God? What is our own faith doing? Jesus put it on us. The limit of the power is our doubt. This story doesn't tell us about any doubt. Okay, it doesn't mention that they had doubts at all. It says a woman went to the prophet and laid out her problem. He gave her directions, and she followed them, and it worked. This is a happily ever after story. Okay, it absolutely is. It's awesome. We could call it quits right here. We could maybe sing some songs and pray. But even for me, this would be a short sermon. So you can see from the bulletin that I've labeled today's sermon plans. There are two types of plans. There are future plans, which are kind of like grand schemes, the big picture plans. And then there are plans of action. This story has plans of action. Elisha told the woman what to do, what actions to take. Vessels. But the family probably made a plan of action as how to collect those vessels. Maybe they each went one way to their neighbors. Maybe they made a plan to keep the vessels in a certain place. Like, you go over here, and then we'll bring the vessels. We'll stack them this way, and if you get this. They made a plan, and then they carried it out. John Wooden, the greatest basketball coach, probably the greatest sports coach of all time, said, failing to plan is preparing to fail. That's pretty deep, I guess, maybe. But it's the truth. I mean, he says if you don't have a plan, you're not going to get where you're looking to go. How many times have you just started to do something without thinking about it? We all do that. You go somewhere, you get somewhere near the middle of it, and you realize that, you know what, I'm in a bit of a mess here. Maybe you start making dinner, and you realize, I don't have any cumin, or whatever you needed to cook at that point. Or, you're in the middle of, I don't have any Phillips head screws. I can't finish this bookcase. Or whatever, you get in the middle of a thing, you're like, oh, I should have had a plan. John Maxwell, who is the Christian leadership guru, he's written about 20 books. He says, good planning always costs less than good reacting. Because that's really where if you get to that mess, and all of a sudden you've got to react. And sometimes you react well, like, what, my neighbor's got cumin, I'll just go knock on her door. Or, you go like, cumin, I've got to send a letter to the factory. Like, that would be a waste of time. That's not a good response. But sometimes in the middle of a mess, you're like, oh, what do I do? And you respond, right? You don't always respond well. Good reacting is hard, and it's cost more than if you just sat down in the first place and said, what's in the cupboard? A little bit of good planning. And you always regret it. Like, that's the thing. When you're doing the reacting, you're like, I wish I could have avoided this problem. Like, we always see that later. Now, to make a plan, though, you need to know what your goal is. Now, if you're just making chili, you know the goal is. That's pretty simple. You're making a bookcase. You know the goal. But you just need to know what you want to happen, because you can't make a plan unless you know what to do. In small things, that's easy. Chili, bookcase. But if you're going to have a fire in your backyard, okay, you're going to, the goal is fire, right? A safe fire, pretty simple. But a plan is still helpful, because you know what wood you're going to use, and what kindling, and what lighter or flint or matches. You don't have to make 4 trips to the garage or go through the junk drawer twice to find matches, because you just made a plan. Like, I'm going to do this later, so you grab it all together. You know the goal, but the plan lets you know the how. The goal is basically the where or the what. The plan is the, and that puts us in limbo a bit. But you can't make a plan without knowing the goal. So it forces us to think about it. That's really all that happens. Guess what? You can know your goals. Because they're up to you. But you have to force yourself to devote time and thought to them. And that helps you achieve them. That's all. It can only help. It can never hurt you to sit down and think, what do I actually want to accomplish here? You start to plan by setting your goal, and then you get to determine the how. You make the plan. You've gone from not knowing what your goal really was to having a goal and having a way to achieve it. You're in a great position. You're rolling. We said failing to plan is preparing to fail. So unless that process was done of the planning, you're really headed toward failure. In a basketball game, which is what John Wooden, he was talking about life, but basketball also. You make a plan. You practice the plan. You talk about the plan. And then the other team shows up. And they probably have a plan too, and part of it is making sure that your plan doesn't work. So that's tough. See, we make plans, but there's going to be resistance. There's always resistance. Our plans will not go according to plan, okay? That's just how life works. But let's continue with the basketball theme. If you play against teams that you can beat without a plan, then you need better competition. If you win against an easy opponent, what have you really won, If you right now are thinking about your life and you don't make plans, but you're not having any problems, then you aren't challenging yourself with your life right now. You are not living up to your potential because you have an ability. God said we are more than conquerors, which means he intends for us to be successful, to overcome challenges. And so if you're not having any challenges, then you're not fulfilling what God planned. Jesus said he came that we might live life more abundant, and a life without challenges is not going to be very abundant, is it? So, but the question is, well, why make plans if they're just going to get opposed? And the answer is because the plans help us know how to react when the plans don't work. See, if your plans get derailed, your first thought has to be, how do I still get to the goal? That's where, this didn't work, but I still want to get there. Since you already made plans, then you know already what the goal is, which helps, okay? And you've thought through some ways that you can get there. Maybe in the planning process, you figured out the best way, hopefully, but you also in that process maybe thought about a plan B. Though this isn't the best way, but now that plan A is derailed, I have a plan B. We can adjust our plans to still reach our goal. When we don't have plans, we get derailed. There's nothing to adjust. Plans have been at square one. And so even in the midst of that opposition, the contest and the challenge, the plans have benefited us by keeping us from, being back at the starting line. John Maxwell also said, our attitude toward unplanned and unpleasant experiences determine our growth. Our attitude toward the problems, the opposition, when our plans aren't working, it's our attitude in that moment that determines how we grow. Not just proceed, but grow, actually improve ourselves. You've heard people say, I tried that. Or churches say it all the time. We tried that. It did not work. And the result is that they don't try it again. They often don't try anything again, it seems. They didn't grow from unplanned experiences. They gave up. And that means that their attitude, according to John Maxwell, was all wrong. And now, it's a way overused story to tell you Thomas Edison, he said, I've not failed. I've just found 1,000 ways that won't work. It's true, because his attitude was to continue. That he was not only that, he found the strength to recognize that he was closer to success than he had been before. See, so we set a goal, we meet opposition, we find out what ways our plan was not adequate because of the opposition. And now we know more about our plan, don't we? We're closer to the goal because we've already made it through steps 1 through 3, and now we know that step 4 was not quite right. His plan met resistance, but he was able to adapt and shift and grow towards success. Jesus told us to plan. It's in red letters in your Bible, Luke chapter 14. For which of you, intent on building a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he's laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him. Jesus said, if you're going to build a tower, make a plan. Isn't that what he says? Know what's going on. Know where you're headed. A common saying is hope for the best and plan for the worst. That saying is admitting that there will be another basketball team on the court. You're going to have troubles, but you can be prepared to a certain extent. Jesus didn't go into all the aspects of building a tower. He didn't tell you that, the price of bricks can go up. He didn't tell you that it may rain on important days and your foundation may get flooded. But he knew that problems. And when you sit down to plan a project, you create some margin for those problems. Do you remember this show, American Chopper? It's old now. They'd make motorcycles, like custom bikes. They design them really cool motorcycles. This show has been copied like a dozen times now for motorcycles and cars and birdhouses, everything. But there's something that eventually really infuriated me about this show. If you remember the father and son right there, father and son, they're always arguing. They actually end up dividing the company because they refused to work together. They would argue over absolutely anything. But one of the things was always time and deadlines. That always created the tension, and that's real to true life. I mean, this is reality TV, right? Whatever that means. But they would create these deadlines for the bikes to be done. Like a guy would come in and say, I want a bike that looks like a spaceship made out of soup cans. And they would say, oh, yeah, that sounds fun. That should take 3 months. I can get it to you by next Thursday. And then they would have to, they'd have problems. Always. They would work all night, and they would fight and argue because of the deadline that they created with no margin. So I was annoyed because they were creating problems for themselves and never learning from them. There's like 9 seasons of the show, and guess what? In season 9, they're like, yeah, I can get you next Thursday. Like, so you learn from them. You plan for problems to come up. That's just smart. Create space to overcome them. Give yourselves margin. Now, some of us aren't in charge of your deadlines. I get that. And in a case-by-case matter, I guess, that you have to do what you have to do. I don't need to talk to you about what stress does to your heart and your brain. If you work in nothing but stress, you will die younger than you have a job with margin. That's a fact. Okay, it will kill you. That's all I'm saying. Sometimes on American Chopper, the customer would come in and say, they would create the deadline. They'd want a bike for we're going to have this parade next Thursday. I need a new bike for the parade. But I knew I had a solution for that. I'm going to share this idea with you. Are you ready? No. Holy cow. Oh, it doesn't make for good TV. I agree. It does not. That would be a terrible episode. But and again, it's easy for me to say up here. Like, I understand that. But let me just, if the idea of saying no to a client or to your boss is impossible for you, then if you're in the only, I'm saying this lightly, perhaps you should consider if you're in the right job. If you're in the only job you can find, I've got nothing but grace, okay? I don't want it, but just consider it. If you're in a job and it's up to you if you stay in that job, if it's impossible to create margin, well, you're going to die sooner than if you find a different job. That's what life is. So think about it. Boom, there's another can of worms I just opened. Let's move on. Let's wrap this up. We serve a God who is looking to protect you and provide for you. He's willing to do what we understand to be impossible to do that. That's what the widow's oil says. He wants to, so much so that what the laws of physics that he created, he'll break them. He will do what we see as impossible because he loves us, because he wants the best for us. But we were going to have the ability always to allow and embrace his miracles or to halt them with our obedience or our doubt. In my 37 plus years, I've never met someone who said that they counted on God more than he was faithful. Think about that. I've never known anyone who said, I went out on a limb and at the end of it, God was nowhere to be faith. We are told to be bold in our faith and to live by that faith, not by our limited sight. To do so responsibly, to do so in a way to maximize our potential and our success, we should plan. Jesus said so. We should set goals, and we should measure the cost of achieving them. We should create margin. We should prepare to meet opposition. We should learn from our struggles and persevere. We serve a God who is looking to magnify his glory on earth, and he has chosen to do that through his people. I mean, the sunsets come every day, and they're glorious, right? There are so many things in creation that is beautiful and awesome, and they catch our attention. We go, God is good. But the thing that God has decided to be the way that he's really going to show you what he's about is he does it through people. Lives that are changed, impossibilities that are overcome. That's where God's glory is magnified. That is the vehicle he has chosen, and we are blessed because of that, because we are that vehicle. So the question is, do you have the guts to set an audacious goal? Do you have the guts to sit down and plan to do something that will require God's help? Do you have the guts to overcome adversity and continue on the path that's before you? If you said yes to all three of those things, and that if you have said yes, but then you actually follow through, if you live yes to those three things, there's only one outcome for you. It's God's glory. Do you get that? Because he's faithful, when you rely on him, that's the end result. When you go out on a limb, you don't find that he's not there, you find that he is there, and that limb is stronger than you thought it was because he has a plan. God's glory. What else is there for us to do in response to this little story, but to the whole theme? Be audacious and be glorious.